This is my fight song, Take Back My Life song, Proof I'm Alright song. My power's turned on, starting right now, I'll be strong. I'll play my fight song. I'm quoting the lyrics from the song to welcome all of you to this webinar in light to fight cancer, as I believe we are committed in reversing cancer through research. Salam sejahtera and a very, very good evening to all of you from us, and thank you for tuning in tonight. In conjunction with the World Cancer Day tomorrow, we are very excited to host this webinar on precision medicine in Asians. I'm Ratina Gunasilan, the Head of Community Outreach Program in Cancer Research Malaysia, and I'm going to be your MC for today. So you would have seen this powerful statement earlier in the first slide. More Asian women are going to die of breast cancer than Caucasian women. We can change that. So well, let me explain why we actually had it there. The Global Cancer Observatory statistics published sometime in November 2020 shown us a very, very worrying figure. 2.3 million new breast cancer cases were identified with 685,000 deaths. Close to half, which is 1 million new cases, were identified in Asia, and half of the deaths, 346,000, originated from this region as well. What if I compare the figures with two other regions combined, Northern America and Europe? We still win, but definitely not for the better. So we are all here today to hear from the experts on the importance on Asian representation in cancer research and how Asian genomics mapping and genetics is used to fight cancer among Asians, as research holds the key to a world where everyone who develops breast cancer lives. So moving on. This is a webinar housekeeping slide for your kind information. So all of you are actually in the listen-only mode. We will be recording the webinar for future viewing, and we definitely want to hear from you. So the Q&A tab is available in the Zoom platform. So kindly use that tab to post all your questions, and the Q&A session will be conducted at the end of the webinar. In case you think of something later, connect with us to our website, www.cancerresearch.my. Okay, so before we hear from our first speaker, let me invite you to watch a very short video with genuine representations of sentiment and hope to fight against cancer.
I am a cancer survivor. I was diagnosed with adenoid cystic carcinoma 9 years ago in 2010.
I'm an ovarian cancer patient. 2010, I was diagnosed.
I'm 80 years old now, and I'm a prostate cancer survivor.
I'm 29 years old. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2015, in February 16th, 2015, I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer.
I was first diagnosed with cancer in early 2017.
6年前呢，就发现到Alan 他有癌症的。
我有胃癌第4期。
不管你相不相信都好，癌症不止在马来西亚，在全世界已经变成一个很普遍的疾病。癌症对我的人生的打击很大，因为我的外婆就是癌症去世的。
我当初一知道的时候，我心情一下子就是安静下来，然后我就想，为什么是我？
It was a devastating experience. I felt in total despair, totally lost, didn't know where to go for help.
And when the pathology report came after my mastectomy, my whole world fell apart.
Well, I was quite young when I had my cancer diagnosed. I was really shocked when I actually got to know the news because I've never met anyone my age at that point of time that had cancer.
我不懂我这个做朋友的我可以帮上什么忙这样子。
I wanted to fight this disease. From there, I decided that yes, there is hope for me And if I go through this treatment, I will continue to live life.
I had the luxury of going through treatment and having like free medications pumped into me just to reduce all of my side effects. If I speak to patients that have gone through treatment 10 years ago, I noticed that treatments are very different from mine. If it weren't for cancer research, we wouldn't have developed the medications that we have now, the treatments that we have now.
Cancer research is very important because when you have people to find out all this, you can find out what is actual problem with your mind.
I'm glad that there is this Cancer Research Malaysia, who's always doing research to find cures.
Without research, there's no medical advancement. Like 40 years ago, out of 4 cancer patients, 1 would survive. But because of research, today, out of 2 patients, 1 will survive. So it's thanks to research that less people are suffering. What if 40 years from now, because of your support, because of our support, cancer can be cured?
Join the fight against cancer.
So join the fight against cancer.
Check out Cancer Research Malaysia. Support them. They need all the support that they can get.
Join the fight against cancer and share this video.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed the video. So moving on, I would like to now invite Ms. Janet Yap, the Chief Executive Officer of Cancer Research Malaysia, for her welcome speech. Over to you, Janet.
Thank you, Regina. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on which time zone you are. And very, very welcome to our Board of Trustees who are attending, and also to all the ladies and gentlemen in this webinar. Thank you for taking the time to join us on this webinar. We are very pleased to welcome so many of you, and we hope that you will find our content insightful. Welcome to our Cancer Research Malaysia's Precision Medicine in Asia. Sorry, there's trying to get the video going. Sorry about that. I'm trying to get my video going. For some reason, it's not working.
Janet, you're good.
I can see you, Janet.
Yeah, but you closed my document.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that. Give me 2 minutes. Okay, sorry about that. We will start again with a good welcome, right? And to the Precision Medicine in Asian webinar. Right? Firstly, I would really like to extend my deepest gratitude to our donors, the Newton Ungku Omafan, Scientex Foundation, Yayasan Saim Darby, Yayasan Petronas, and the Estee Lauder Group of companies, whose contribution really have been exemplary, right, to our genomic study, and that helped us to advance precision medicine for Asian breast cancer patients. This study would also not have been possible without the support of University of Cambridge, Cancer Research UK, British High Commission Kuala Lumpur, Subang Jaya Medical Center, Academy Science Malaysia, University Malaya Medical Center, and Ong Hing Tian and Ong Sek Pek Foundation. There are also many other donors whose support enables us to continue to do what we do. And I'm extremely thankful to Kin Starfish Foundation and Restage Malaysia as well. But most importantly, right, really to our shining stars, the patients that have been so supporting in their sharing and contribution of samples, without which we would not have been able to do this study at all. So distinguished guests, Cancer Research Malaysia was established in 2001 as an independent research organization focusing on one thing, Asians. You see, Asians make up half of the world's cancer cases, but we are in less than 10% of the research. And as we saw in the video, without research, we won't have the life-saving data that is needed to know our risk of cancer. Without research, we wouldn't know which cancer treatments are more effective for Asians. With research, we can ensure that the fight against cancer doesn't miss Asians, especially Malaysians. So 20 years on, I'm proud to say that under the leadership of our Chief Scientific Officer, Professor Datin, Paduka, Dr. Hwang, a team of Malaysian scientists are paving the way in which Asian cancer research with many, many firsts. We've made Malaysia the first country in Asia with nationwide access to genetic risk counseling for ovarian cancer patients. And we hope to extend this life-saving service to more cancer patients. We've developed the first Buatan Malaysia oral cancer vaccine, and we're going into clinical trials this year. And today, you will hear from Prof. Teo on another of our firsts. So I'd like to also end by saying a big terima kasih to all our participating patients, to all our donors, the talented scientists, local and international researchers who made all of this possible. Up next, we will have Professor Datin Paduka, Dr. Hwang, Chief Scientific Officer at Cancer Research Malaysia, to share exciting details on the breakthrough discoveries from this genomics research. An award-winning scientist trained at the University of Cambridge, Professor Datin Paduka Teo, together with Yamat Mulia Tunku Ahmad, founded Cancer Research Malaysia in 2001. For her outstanding work in cancer research, Prof. Teo has won many awards, like the Top Research Scientist of Malaysia Award, an Honorary Order of the British Empire, OBE, from Queen Elizabeth II, and the Dato Sharafuddin Idris Shah Award from His Royal Highness Sultan of Selangor in 2018. Please welcome Professor Datin Paduka, Dr. Teo.
Thank you very much, Janet, for that really nice introduction. It's been really nice to have Janet within the team because for the first time, we've been able to split our tasks at the leadership of Cancer Research Malaysia and ensure that we have a leadership team that can move forward progressively for the organization and the cause. Imagine you are told you have breast cancer. As Ratina said, 2.3 million women all around the world this year are going to be told, unfortunately, that they have breast cancer. But imagine a different future. Imagine one in which everyone is told they have early breast cancer, not just breast cancer, but they have early breast cancer. And because of the advances in research, there's now a 96% chance of survival. Even though you need to have surgery, radiotherapy, and chemotherapy, the outlook is good. And indeed, because of medical research, more people are surviving cancer. As you heard Jared mention in the video, in 1970, 1 in 4 people survived 10 years from cancer. In 2010, that number globally became 2 in 4 survived at least 10 years. And as a global cancer research community, we hope that by the year 2050, at least 3 in 4 cancer patients would survive at least 10 years. But it is even better for breast cancer. Breast cancer outcome has already improved significantly. In 2010, up to 3 in 4 cancer patients would survive 10 years in many countries around the world. And by 2050, the goal could be that 9 in 10 patients, or even more, will survive at least 10 years. And all of this is made possible because of research. But unfortunately, even today, up to 30 to 50% of patients have metastatic breast cancer. Cancer that has spread to other parts of the body, sometimes de novo, that means at presentation, sometimes because the treatment which was given in an early stage disease did not work. And in a metastatic setting, there's still only a 19% or 1 in 5 chance of survival. So there's a lot more that we can do. And why is that the case? Well, we now know that part of the reason why treating cancer is so difficult is because it's a heterogeneous disease. What this means, heterogeneous disease, means that it's not always the same in every single patient. So for example, a breast cancer patient today might already receive a diagnosis where they are either hormone receptor positive and they get one type of treatment, or they are positive for a marker called HER2 and they get a different type of treatment, or they're negative for both the hormone receptor as well as a HER2 receptor, and they're called triple negative breast cancers, and they're given a different type of treatment. So just knowing that there are many different types of breast cancer and many treatments that work better for these subtypes has enabled doctors to already improve the outcome for cancer patients. But even so, there remain challenges. So for hormone receptor positive disease, even though 96% will survive 10 years, some, maybe only 4%, will get recurrent disease very early on. And it's currently not possible by just looking down a microscope or examining a patient. Why is it? Which of those individuals will develop metastatic disease? Which of those individuals will develop recurrent disease? And we need to go much further. So instead of looking at a treatment option where we use one drug for all patients, and we get responses in some patients, no response in other patients, or side effects without any response in yet other patients, in the future, and in fact, for many breast cancer patients, this future is already happening now. What we want to be able to do is to be able to understand which drug or which treatment will work for every single patient, so that by giving different drugs to different patients and being able to treat each type of patient and each type of cancer differently, we hopefully will get treatment responses from every single patient that we treat. And this is exactly the goal of precision medicine, to be able to give the right treatment to the right patient at the right time, and hopefully at the right cost or the right affordability. But what makes precision medicine possible is to be able to have data on the cancer types that occur in our population. And unfortunately today, the majority of the precision medicine the data that has been generated in the Caucasian population. So even though 1 million breast cancer cases occur among Asians, Asians until recently made up only a small proportion of the genomic studies. So together with Subang Jaya Medical Center and my good friend, as well as the top breast surgeon, Professor Dato Dr. Cheng, together with the resident pathologist, Professor Dr. Padmanathan Rajadurai, together with collaborators at the University of Cambridge, Professor Carlos Caldas, Dr. Suet-Feung, and an amazing team both in Cambridge as well as in Malaysia, led principally by Dr. Pan Wern and by an amazing team of scientists in Malaysia. We set out to create an understanding of precision medicine in Asian patients. And this work was recently published in Nature, or Nature Communications, in December last year. So 3 days before Christmas, the best Christmas present we could have received. So what does this mean, building a genomic database of Asian breast cancers? Well, in 2015, before we started this work, Asians only made up about 2% of the genomic maps that were known for breast cancer. And in 2020, because of the work that was funded by charity, because of the work conducted in this collaborative effort, we were able to increase the proportion of Asian cancers that were represented in these genomic maps, with Malaysia leading the way with 19% of the global maps generated through Malaysian cancer patients. This is only possible because many of the patients that were treated in Subang Jaya Medical Center consented to have their to having their surplus tissue samples used for research so that they can help other patients in the future, so that we can help to increase an understanding of Asian breast cancers and use that information to develop better treatments for patients. So what exactly is a genome? We've heard this phrase, a genomic map. Exactly what is a genome? Well, for many of you in the audience, you might already be scientists and doctors and students, and you might remember this from biology. But I'm going to go back to basics. So basics, well, basically our DNA, we have about 3 billion alphabets in every single human cell that encodes. It's a reference book that encodes for everything that we know of a human being. And this comes in 4 different alphabets, A, C, G, and T. And together it's structured in a way that gives the cells instructions on how to make proteins, or the functional parts of a human cell. So you could think about the reference book being copied into a recipe, and the recipe being used to make proteins or the cake. And we all know that if we're making a cake and instead of putting in 4 eggs, we put in 40 eggs, we're gonna get a terrible cake. In the same way, if there are mutations in the DNA or the genome of a cancer cell, then what will happen is that the recipe that is copied is wrong, and as a consequence, the wrong proteins are generated, and the cells start to misbehave and grow where they're not supposed to grow, and they stop responding to the anti-growth signals that normally happen in order to prevent cancer cells from growing. How did this happen? Well, we first started by collecting lots and lots of tissues from cancer patients. We started this program in 2012. Then we won a Newton Unku Omar grant in collaboration with the University of Cambridge and Subang Jaya Medical Center to analyze the genome of cancer cells and to generate terabytes of data. Some of you might be wondering, what on earth is a terabyte of data? Well, that's a heck of a lot of data. To think about it, it would be more or less about 2,000 of your laptops worth of data. And we collected all of that data in order to be able to help us analyze what exactly is going wrong in cancer cells and how can we use that information to develop better treatment options for cancer patients. Next slide. So where have we got to in this effort? Well, in doing this genomic map, we found three different things, three important observations. Number one, we found that Asian women are more likely to develop a type of cancer called HER2 positive breast cancers. HER2 is a marker that tells a cell to divide or to grow, and this type of breast cancer seems to be more common in the Asian population. The second observation that we found was that Asian breast cancer patients are more likely to have P53 mutations, and this is a gene that's called the guardian of the genome, and Asians are more likely to have this mutation. And finally, we found that Asian breast cancers are more likely to have an enriched immune cell. So what does this all mean? Why is it significant? Next slide. Well, HER2 positive disease is unfortunately one of the more aggressive types of diseases. So it is one that has a lower overall survival compared to other subtypes of diseases. And rather surprisingly, we know very, very little about this type of disease because it's less common than the hormone receptor positive or luminal A type of breast cancer. So this shows you just what it is that we know about the risk factors associated with the common HR positive or hormone receptor positive luminal A type of breast cancer. You know that having more children, having older age at first birth, breastfeeding, and so on are associated with either a decreased risk or an increased risk of luminal A breast cancers. But look at the column for HER2 overexpressed tumors. We know almost nothing about the risk factors that are associated with this disease. What this means is that for the first time, we really need to understand why is it that Asian women are more likely to get this disease. And for patients today, we need to make sure that they have access to HER2 targeted therapy because HER2 targeted therapy significantly improves their survival. Next slide, please. The second observation was that the guardian of the genome, this gene called P53, is more commonly mutated in Asian cancers. What is P53? Well, P53 is like a little scout that goes around the genome of normal cells and tells the cells to stop dividing and take stock before it divides because there's now been an error in the genome. So it's called the guardian of the genome because it helps the cell check itself before mistakes in the genome are made into many, many more cancer cells. We now don't know how it is that we might be able to use targeted therapy to treat P53 mutated cancers, and this will be an area of research moving forward. And the third big observation that we found is that Asian cancers are more likely to be immune enriched. We all know that the immune system is critical in our fight against cancer, but there are many different types of there are many aspects of the immune system. Some aspects of the immune system are very good, and boosting those immune system could really help us fight cancers. But there are other aspects of the immune system that could be bad, and stimulating that could actually be detrimental to us. And what we find is that Asian women are more likely to have immune cells that are infiltrating into and surrounding the tumor cells itself. And this is true of all the different subtypes of breast cancer. So what does this mean? Where are we going from here? Well, the genomic map is really just a launching pad to enable us to make sure that Asians are not left out, but this is not where we stop. Where we want to go is use this information to benefit more cancer patients. We want to understand these new biomarkers, take them into clinical trials, and develop new therapeutic options for Asian breast cancer patients. And perhaps some of the discoveries that we understand from Asian patients will begin to help us understand how to treat cancers even in non-Asian patients, even in the Caucasian populations. So some things are just more common in the Asian population, enabling us to study this more effectively and hopefully translating it for better treatments for all women around the world. Next step. So where have we got to? I'm going to give you two examples of how we've already taken this forward into clinical trials. You'll be amazed. You'll be wondering, wow, how did Prof and team publish a paper just 3 days before Christmas and they are already talking about a clinical trial? Well, the reality is that we've already started working on this clinical trial something like 3 years ago. We already had an observation that a germline or a genetic marker that's called ApoBac3B was a lot more common in the Asian population compared to the European or the African population. You can see those little circles in the African population and they're essentially all white. This basically says that this marker is just absent in the African population. But if you move eastwards, you'll see that in the Asian population, at least half of the population have this genetic marker. And in the Polynesian population, nearly 95% of the population have this marker. And what we found is that when you have this marker, you develop immune hot or immune active hot cancers, suggesting that Asian patients with this marker may respond to a new type of therapy that was originally developed for lung cancer and for skin cancer that activates the patient's own immune cells to be able to kill cancer cells. And what you see in the really nice video from the University of Cambridge is just a video showing an immune cell, when activated, can go ahead and engulf and eat up those cancer cells. So the AURA clinical trial will be evaluating immunotherapy in patients with metastatic breast cancer. And we launched this trial together with University of Malaya and National University Hospital of Singapore. And we hope to be able to report on the outcome of this trial within the next year or so. Next slide, please. We didn't stop there. We also noticed that the genomes of these cancer patients were very different according to what was the carcinogen. So if you think about it, the last time that you went to the beach, I know many of us haven't been to the beach and it's a rather sore point to be talking about going down to the beach at this point. But if you think back to the happy memories that we have at the beach, if you look at the beach and the footprints on the sand, you'll be able to pick out which ones were made by the bird, which ones were made by the dog, which ones were made by a human being, and which ones was made by a car. And in the same way, when we look at the footprints in the genomes of a cancer cell, we can tell which ones were caused by carcinogens in our environment, which ones may have been caused by internal carcinogens, and so on. And what we found is we can identify the footprints of genomically unstable cancers, and those footprints identify a type of cancer that may now respond to a new type of therapy that was initially developed for patients with BRCA1 and BRCA2 mutations. So the TENOR trial is supported by an international global research grant that we won from a major pharmaceutical company, and we will be launching this first investigator-initiated trial. Hopefully, sometime this year, all of the contracts are nearly in place. We hope to be able to open this for patients in the coming months. These are just two examples showing you why it is important to ensure that Asians are not left out in the fight against cancer. A simple task of standing outside Prof. Yip's operating theatre, collecting consent from patients, collecting tissue samples, analyzing those, led us to this point where we created the world's largest genomic map of Asian breast cancers. And using the data accrued from this largest genomic map of Asian breast cancers, we're already taking it forward into clinical trials. I think this in itself has been an amazing journey. But for me, what is more amazing is that this is all funded by charity. You know, if you think back, how many organizations in the developed world, in Asia, are supported entirely by charity to do this type of work? Well, the majority of research organizations are funded by governments. They're funded through research grants, institutional support, and so on. But we are not. We are funded, yes, through research grants, but we compete to win those. More importantly, we're funded by members of the public, by charitable organizations, by Yayasan Saindabi, who supports our salary, Yayasan Petronas, who supports our infrastructure. But many of you would have supported this effort by buying a lipstick or makeup from Estee Lauder group of companies, by turning up and donating 10 ringgit, buying a t-shirt, and doing your part to show us that solidarity in the fight against cancer is important. This is a fight that we're only going to be able to win if we all make a contribution in whatever way we can, or in a sense, sikit-sikit jadi bukit. This is our first webinar, and to be really honest, I'm really nervous. I've been really nervous all day, and I wasn't sure how this was going to work out. I'm really pleased to see that more than 300 people have made time for us this evening to attend this webinar. We're going to plan a number of these coming forward, and we hope that you have enjoyed this webinar enough to be able to tell your friends and your network more about Cancer Research Malaysia. Because unfortunately, very few people know that Cancer Research Malaysia even exists. Very few people want to talk about cancer, and nobody seems to know that a non-profit organization fully reliant on donations can do this type of work right here in Malaysia. So come back for our next installment of the webinar. We will be telling you more about a paper we just published last week in the New England Journal of Medicine, where we are developing a breast calculator for Asian women to enable women to understand what is their individual risk of developing breast cancer. Some women have a 2% chance of developing breast cancer, others have a 65% chance of developing breast cancer. And for the first time, we've put together all of the research that enables us to know for certain what is it that an individual Asian woman's risk of breast cancer might be. We've already used this information to work out which individuals may benefit from preventing breast cancer. We launched the MISO study to try and evaluate whether soy and drinking soy milk reduces their risk of developing breast cancer. As Janet has already mentioned, we developed an oral cancer vaccine and much, much more. So follow us on Facebook, share the information with your network, because this has to be a grassroots support. And we hope that you will join us in the fight against cancer. Thank you very much for making time to attend this. I am really, really privileged to be working with an extremely good team, an extremely dedicated team, as well as to have support of clinicians, and most of all, to have support of the patients and many of you who have contributed in one way or another to make the work that we do possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof, for really enlightening us with some empirical evidence, I would call it, and also theories behind all the efforts by Cancer Research Malaysia in collaboration with our esteemed partners. Thank you again, Prof. So now, moving on, the next item in the agenda, we have now finally at the Q&A session. So I would like to first introduce our respected panelists to join Prof. Teo to take up questions from all of you. So we have Dr. Wern, Deputy Head of Bioinformatics, Cancer Research Malaysia, who's also the first author of the genomic study. We have Professor Emeritus Dato Dr. Cheng. She's a consultant breast surgeon from Subang Jaya Medical Center, and she's a clinical lead of the genomic study. And with us also Dr. Suet-Feung, the Senior Research Associate from University of Cambridge. She's also the co-lead of the genomic study. So with that, can I have our dear panelists with their videos switched on and their mics are unmuted? While we are getting our panelists to come on board, I would like to request from all the audiences, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A tab to post your questions, not really at the chat button. So this will help us to monitor the questions and also ask the appropriate questions to the panelists to answer you. Okay, while waiting for all the questions to line up, maybe I would start with Dr. Jaya. Dr. Jaya, so tell us more. How did the team actually build the entire database? What were the challenges involved?
Hi, thank you for that question. So as you can imagine, building this database was a very big and complicated collaboration, and many things had to fall into place. And so we really owe a huge amount of thanks to the patients and doctors at SGMC who provided the tumor samples, and also to the Carter's lab at Cambridge, which actually conducted the genomic sequencing of the samples. And on our end, I would say we actually had really two big primary challenges. And first was the collection and maintenance of this large biobank of samples. And this took a lot of very careful, meticulous work over many years. And so a huge props to the biobanking team at Cancer Research Malaysia, who did all of that work. And I would say the second probably big challenge that we had was actually to build the computational infrastructure that we needed to process all these terabytes and terabytes of data that Sue just mentioned earlier. And we really wouldn't have been able to do that without the support of donors and support of our fund funding teams. And also without recent advances in cloud computing from companies such as Amazon and Microsoft, we really couldn't have done it. So a lot of things really had to come together at the right time. And I think we're very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time.
Wow, that's nice. Thank you so much, Dr. Jawan, for the answer. Moving on, I would like to ask a question to Professor Yip. Prof. Yip, you're there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, yes, now I can see you.
Yes.
So Prof, as one of Malaysia's leading breast surgeons and top 2% most cited scientists in the world, I would like to know from you, what is the significance, Prof, of this genomic study from a clinical perspective?
Well, thank you very much for the question. As a surgeon, I'm involved mostly in the surgery of breast cancer, but the treatment of breast cancer started more than 100 years ago. And the first radical mastectomy was done in 1882 by Halsted. It was followed by development in radiotherapy and then later chemotherapy. So surgery, radiotherapy, chemotherapy are the mainstay of treatment of breast cancer. But now, in recent years, research has led to the identification of 4 main subtypes of breast cancer. And as you see with this genomic sequencing, you find that there's even more than these 4 subtypes of breast cancer. So clinically, it's very important to look at the hormone receptors and the HER2, which Professor Teo has mentioned. So there was development of hormone therapy for patients who were ER positive, and the HER2 proto-oncogen was discovered later, and this led to the development of targeted therapy in the 1980s with the anti-HER2 treatment, which was unfortunately very expensive at the time, and not many Malaysians had access to it. Even now, only about 20% of women with HER2 positive breast cancer have access to targeted therapy. And now we have immunotherapy because, as Professor Teo says, we have found that the cancers in the Asian women have more of these immune cells, and which means that they might respond to immune therapy, but you have to find a target. What sort of cancers would respond to immune therapy? And that is the purpose of the oral trial, which is mentioned, because if you find that these patients, that you want to identify a group of patients who might respond, because you just cannot use treatment in all patients. Because you know that if you use hormone therapy in women who are ER negative, it will not work. And immunotherapy is a very expensive treatment. So and it's only a few breast cancers who will respond to it. You have to identify the ones that will respond. And that is why research in breast cancers are very important. We have to find out what sort of patients, Asian patients, are going to respond to certain treatment, because most of the research done in the West may not apply to Asians. So it's quite important that we do research on Asian patients, so that we will know what sort of treatment would be best suited for them. And again, I would like to echo what the others have said. Thank you very much to the patients that contributed their tissue, because this is not easy to do biobanking. I'm sure Dr. Pan will say just now, it's a challenge because the tissue has to be fresh. It's got to be like frozen within like half an hour. So you might say there are so many patients. Why are we not collecting more and more samples? We are actually collecting more and more samples. And Cancer Research Malaysia has probably got the biggest biobank of breast cancer tissue, probably in the whole country, from what I can see.
Thank you so much, Prof. So we have Dr. Chin on the line. Dr. Chin,
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Dr. Chin. Firstly, thank you so much for calling in today from the UK. I hope you're doing great, Dr. Chin.
Oh, this call is easier than the previous one, because this one is lunchtime. So no, the previous one was 4 o'clock in the morning.
Wow, I'm so glad you're with us. Yes. So Dr. Chin is actually the key person in some of the really big UK-Canada genomic studies, and she co-led this genomic study with Malaysian scientists in her home country. So Dr. Chin, as a Malaysian scientist yourself, how does it feel to be part of the genomic study that reveals new and potentially life-saving data about Asian cancer patients? Tell us more.
Thank you, first of all, for inviting me for the webinar. Okay, it's very interesting to see what is happening in Malaysia. And I'm very honored to have been asked to join this collaboration, because I left Malaysia 20 over years ago to do my PhD, and I've always wanted to contribute to science advancements in Malaysia, and finally can. So tick off my to-do list, okay? And so it's really good because, as you say, everything that we know is based on Caucasian breast cancers, okay? We've done big projects. We've identified that breast cancer is heterogeneous. It's not one subtype. It's actually 11 subtypes based on the eye clusters. And it's good to see that a lot of it is reflected in the Asian breast cancers. But again, there are very, very subtle differences. And these subtle differences are the ones that's going to make it important to determine what treatment the women goes through. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Chin. Sorry, there was a technical glitch. Okay, so I think there are quite a number of questions coming up for us. So probably I'll take the first one. Could you please explain about breast cancer risk calculator? Prof. Su, would you like to take this? Or Dr. Jiawen, maybe?
I can certainly take that question.
Okay.
I think what I mentioned earlier was that, oftentimes for many breast cancer patients, they'll be asking the question, why did I get the disease? If only 1 in 19 Malaysian women get breast cancer, why me? Why am I the one rather than the 19, right? And for many women, they think that their risk is only high if someone in their family, like their mother or their sister and so on, has got breast cancer. It is true that if you have someone close in your family that has breast cancer or ovarian cancer, you have a higher risk of the disease. But unfortunately, that's not the only predictor. We now know that there are many genetic factors that are associated with a higher risk to cancer. So I'm sure everyone has heard of Angelina Jolie and how Angelina Jolie inherited a gene called BRCA that increased her risk of developing breast cancer. Well, we now know of many other genes that are also associated with an increased risk of cancer, and we can combine all of them into one genetic test that helps a woman understand what her individual risk of cancer is. Why is this important? Well, if you know that your risk of, if people think about it and say my risk of cancer is 4%, you may not be very motivated to attend screening because it's only a 4% chance of developing cancer, right? But if you know that your risk is 65%, you may be more motivated to attend screening because you know that you can pick up the cancer at an earlier stage when it's going to be curable. You're going to be talking about 96% chance of survival or even better. And I think that's the reason why we've been working so hard at developing such a risk calculator so that we can provide women with individual information that can help them make decisions about the screening that is right for them. What age should they start screening? How frequently should they screen? And so on and so forth. So I'm not going to be able to cover the details of that today, but please do join us at our next webinar, which we hope to organize in about a month's time. Then we'll talk about the results of that risk calculator and what have we learned and how can patients use that information for screening practices for their family members in the future.
Okay, thank you, Prof. But before I go to the next question, I would like to just mention about this. So for those of you, for questions that is specific to your diagnosis and also treatment, we apologize that we will not be able to take up that question during this webinar. So our sincere request is for you to seek for opinion and suggestions from your treating physician. So the next question would be, probably Dr. Jiawen can take this. How long does it take from identification of a gene till the usage of the gene in precision medicine?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. The short answer is it depends. Well, but that's of course not a very informative answer. And a lot of it depends on the specifics of the mechanism of the gene. There are certain genes that have a very clear-cut mechanism of action where it's relatively straightforward to try and bring biomarkers that use that gene, to use that gene as either a biomarker or as a target of therapy. But all of these genes, to test all of this requires clinical trials. And clinical trials are very difficult and take a long time. So certain genes are more tractable than others, but in most cases, it will take upwards of 5 or even up to 10 years, depending on the specific questions that are being answered. So, but thank you very much for that question. I think a lot of people.
Thank you, Dr. Jaya. Just a gentle reminder for everyone who wants to ask a question, please post your question in the Q&A tab. so that we can see which are the questions that you can upvote, or probably something that you really want to ask all the panelists. So it'll be easier for us to maneuver and ask the questions to our dear panelists here. So the next question, I think Dr. Jaya, it's going to come to you again, probably. In your research, do you have a breakdown of Asian women by ethnicity?
Yes, so I think I will probably try and answer this question in conjunction with all of the other questions that we have been getting so far regarding ethnicity. So we, in our study, have lumped together kind of all of the Malaysian women that we studied under the general group category of Asian women. And many people rightly, especially Malaysians, will wonder, you know, how different then, are you studying Malaysian Chinese women? Are you studying Malay women or Indian women? And how closely and how genetically similar are they? And so the answer to that is that from population genetic studies, we actually know that most Asian women, and actually Asians in general, actually form a cluster that is separate and distinct from Caucasians, which are Westerners and other ethnicities in the West. And so most Asian ethnicities are actually genetically much closer to each other than they are to Western population. So that means that we can actually apply a lot of the findings in our studies across most of the different ethnicities in Asia. So to be upfront, the study that we conducted was the samples were mainly from SGMC, which has mostly Chinese women, but we also did include a fair amount of Malay and Indian women as well. So.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Jaya. There's this question from Meera Menon. Isn't cancer genetic? Could a person know in advance based on the DNA testing if one is at the risk of getting cancer? So who would like to take this question?
Sorry, Retina, I couldn't hear the question. Can you repeat that?
Okay. The question is from Meera Menon. Isn't cancer genetic? Could a person know in advance based on the DNA testing if one is at the risk of getting cancer?
The genetic test will identify individuals at higher risk, but it doesn't detect the cancer itself. So it tells you your probability of getting cancer, but you need a screening test to be able to detect the cancer. And the screening test that is being used, the most sensitive test is a mammogram. And a mammogram is currently recommended for average women to start a mammogram from the age of 50, probably every 2 years. But for individuals who may have a family member that's affected by breast cancer, particularly if it's a close family member, they might want to start screening at a younger age. So usually we say that you should really be breast aware, you know, from the age of 25, you should consider screening maybe 10 years before the age of diagnosis of a close family member. So if your mother was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 48, you might want to consider some form of screening in the age of 38 as an example.
Okay, thank you, Prof. So the next question from CK Lai. What was the level of support and collaboration from the governments or medical centers in Asia?
That's a great question. I think for this study, it was primarily done with Subang Medical Center and with University Malaya Medical Center. So the first publication was mostly patients from SGMC only, but the 1,000 genomic map was actually involving University Malaya patients as well. But in terms of other centers, you know, for the clinical trial, the oral clinical trial is now being conducted together with University Malaya as well as the National University Hospital in Singapore. And the second trial, the TENOR trial, will be conducted across a number of different hospitals in Malaysia. We're currently not planning to do that in other countries. As for the New England Journal of Medicine paper and our research that we've been doing on breast cancer risk, that has involved 45,000 women across Asia. And this includes Japan, Korea, North China, South China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and so on. But I think what is significant is that without Malaysia and Singapore, there really would be very few Southeast Asians, no Southeast Asians represented. So it's because of the combined effort of Malaysia and Singapore that we're not just able to put Asians on the map, but Southeast Asians on the map.
Right, okay, thank you, Prof. The next question. How would the results from this study influence the way breast cancer screening is conducted currently?
This study will not influence screening. Please do come and attend our next webinar. We'll talk a lot more about screening and prevention of cancer. So there are two aspects of genetic studies. One aspect of genetics is really understanding what has gone wrong in the cancer cells, in normal cells, to make them cancer cells. And we use that type of information to choose what treatment will work best for the patient. The other type of genetic test is to understand what was inherited from your mother or your father within family, and how can it tell you what your risk of developing cancer is. So for today, the genomics map is really about the cancer genetic changes and treatment options. Come and attend our next webinar, and we'll tell you more about the genetic factors that are associated with why some women have higher risk and other women have lower risk, and what can you do about screening and prevention of cancers.
Okay, thank you, Prof. We are at 9:25 p.m., 5 minutes before closing, but I must say that the conversations are getting more and more exciting, but the time is definitely not in our favor. We'll be taking more questions after the next item on our agenda, which is the closing by Ms. Janet. However, before that, did you know Malaysia is a crucial player in the global race to find new detection, prevention, and cures for cancer? Watch the upcoming video to know the answer. Stay with us for Miss Janet's closing. She has something really, really important to share with all of us.
Did you know?
Did you know? Did you know?
Did you know?
Did you know?
Did you know that cures for some cancers do exist?
There are over 200 different types of cancers.
And some of them are already curable.
You could say that researchers have found a way to reverse cancer.
But it didn't happen overnight.
I survived cancer.
I survived cancer.
I survived cancer.
I survived cancer because of medical research
done yesterday.
I believe
to cure more types of cancers tomorrow.
We need to do more research today.
Today.
We are Cancer Research Malaysia,
A non-profit medical research organization
working to reverse cancer
in as many ways as we can.
In the world of cancer research, there isn't enough.
There really isn't enough focus on Asian genetics
and the cancers that are common here.
We are ensuring that the fight against cancer
doesn't miss Asians,
especially Malaysians.
Like you and me.
Like you and me.
But we need your support.
We need your support.
We need your support.
Because we are funded entirely by donations.
We are already working on vaccines to prevent some cancers.
Our scientists are using genetics to sharpen diagnosis
and therapy.
New ways to make treatment more accessible to patients.
Projects to reuse existing drugs in new and more affordable ways.
Mobile technology to speed up screening
in remote locations.
We have started this fight.
But there's so much more we can do.
Talk to us
and find out how science can reverse cancer for our future
and the future of our loved ones.
And please donate to ensure we finish this fight.
We are Cancer Research Malaysia.
And we are reversing cancer
through research.
All right, everyone. I would like to stay at this slide for a while to thank all our panelists who joined our Q&A session, but please stay because we might be extending the Q&A session after the closing by Ms. Janet. So moving on, I would like to pass the floor back to Janet for your closing.
Thank you, Regina, and thank you all the attendees for all your questions. And I'm definitely sure that we will stay on a little bit longer to take some of those questions. I have a look at them, and I think it's quite important we share some of the research that we have. So stay on after my session, and we will attempt to answer more of your questions. So let's take a look again at where we are, right, in our genomics research. We have collected samples, we have analyzed data, and now really the most exciting part, we are identifying more possible treatment options for Asian cancer patients, right? We hope that more organizations and Malaysians will keep this life-saving research going. As you can see, we need 500,000 ringgit a year to take this milestone research to the next level. To date, thanks to your donation and sponsors and support, we would need 300K to complete our genomic study for this year to take it to the next level. But we are more than just the genomics projects, and I think you have heard Professor Teo allude to it. I've spoken about it as well, that we have additional work that we want to do, right? So the more that people donate to us, the more good research work we can do to save Asian lives. Ladies and gentlemen, Cancer Research Malaysia is funded entirely by your giving through research grants and through donations and sponsorships. We hope that more organizations and Malaysians will keep this life-saving research going. There is still so much more to be done to ensure that the fight against cancer doesn't bypass Asians, especially Malaysians. From risk prediction to finding solutions for other types of cancer that are more common in Asians. So join us in the fight against cancer. If you are an individual, it only takes 10 ringgit a month to help save lives. And if you're an organization, 100 ringgit a month can make a big difference for Asian cancer patients. You can also show your support by helping us raise awareness for cancer research. And we have some very exciting campaigns coming soon, very, very soon. So please stay tuned. Thank you once again for attending, for all your questions, for your support, for your interest. But let's reverse the big C together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janet. So I think with that, we will go back to the Q&A session. So do we still have our panelists with us?
Absolutely, I'm still here and typing away.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Prof. Su.
I'm also here.
Is that Prof Yip? Okay. All right, so I'm just looking at the numerous questions that we have. Let me just read through this. Okay, the next question probably...
Retina, we can take this question because this is very...
yes, Prof, please.
Frequently asked by members of the public, which is, are there any tumor markers that can be used for breast cancer? So very often, people go for a general health screen and then they're offered one blood marker or another for the detection of cancer. So some of these markers are useful for monitoring disease. That means if you already have cancer, these blood markers can help a doctor tell whether the cancer is coming back or is not responding to treatment and so on. But if you're a healthy individual and you don't have any cancer, then these blood markers are not very useful for early detection of cancer. And the reason is because many cancer patients will have cancer, but the blood marker is normal. And other patients will have elevated, that means a suspicious blood marker is elevated, but they actually don't have cancer. So both of those circumstances are not good, which is why from a screening perspective, we do not recommend that people use blood markers as blood cancer markers as a means for screening of breast cancer or screening for any cancer. So the main screening protocols that we would recommend is if you are a woman, there are 3 screenings that you should consider. Number 1, consider a mammogram when you are 50 years old and above. Consider having a cervical screen, either by a pap smear or HPV DNA from when you are sexually active. And also consider having some form of colorectal cancer screening, either a FOBT, a fecal occult blood test from the age of 50, or having a colonoscopy also from the age of 50. So these are the 3 cases for women that they attend screening. And for men, it really is about colorectal cancer screening and potentially prostate cancer screening using a PSA test.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Su. For the next question, from Nikki Uy, for those already diagnosed with breast cancer, is there a need to get screening for possibility of metastatic or developing another primary cancer?
Prof. Yip, would you like to take that question?
What is the question again?
So Prof. Yip, I'm repeating the question by Nikki. For those already diagnosed with breast cancer, is there a need to get screening for possibility of metastasis or developing another primary cancer?
Well, if you have breast cancer on one side, there's a 5% chance of getting breast cancer in the opposite side. If you are BRCA positive, or then there is almost a 50% chance of getting breast cancer on the opposite side. So in those sorts of cases, we would recommend a prophylactic mastectomy on the opposite side. Now, if you are BRCA positive, there's a possibility of getting other cancers, such as mainly ovarian cancer. So if you are BRCA positive, we will do ovarian cancer screening, or even recommend that you remove the ovaries to prevent getting ovarian cancer. Other cancers, of course, we do see like maybe about a 5% chance. I've seen patients with breast cancer who later go on to develop like colon cancer, the common cancers like colorectal cancer. They can develop uterus cancer. So of course, the chance of developing another cancer is always there. When we do follow up, we actually ask for symptoms, okay? Some people will do a chest x-ray, ultrasound abdomen, pelvis every year, blood test every year with tumor markers every year. That's screening to look for any recurrence. But I always tell patients, we can screen you in January every year, but you can develop a metastasis like in March. Okay, so screening does not prevent a metastasis or a new cancer from coming up. It's just for early detection. Normally, we depend on patients having symptoms. Like for breast cancer, the commonest sites of metastases are in the lungs, liver, or bones. So if they have a cough, they have difficulty breathing, they lose appetite, they have backache, then they should report to their doctor as early as possible and get the scans done for everything. So does that answer your question?
I hope that answered Nikki's question.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we want to take one last question. So there is a question about what, yes, Prof, you were saying something? Okay, so what are the other options besides chemo, as now there is pills? Is there any side effects of this? I think it's a very treatment related question. Do you want to take this, Prof? Or
yes. You see, the treatment of breast cancer depends so much on the presentation. If a woman comes to me with a very large tumor, or clinically, I see that it's stage 3, large tumor with lymph nodes, I would say you need chemotherapy first. It's called neoadjuvant chemotherapy, after which we will do surgery and radiotherapy. Hormone therapy depends on the ER status, whether positive or negative. Giving targeted therapy such as Herceptin and Perjeta if they are HER2 positive. Right now, in the initial treatment, there is no role for immunotherapy. It's usually only given in the metastatic setting. That means if the cancer has already spread. Okay, now, if I see a patient with very early breast cancer, it's a small lump, then surgery is carried out first, and she has the option of either doing a lumpectomy or a mastectomy. And also, if there's no lymph nodes, either doing taking out all the lymph nodes or taking out 1 or 2 lymph nodes. So all this is a discussion with the patient. It's very important to do counseling about treatment. Okay, counseling is, sorry, I have to charge my battery. Okay, counseling is the most important thing when it comes to treatment. We have patients who somehow go for alternative therapy instead of going for conventional treatment. In fact, I just saw one patient who's doing yoga. Now, I have to tell you that yoga does not work for breast cancer. Nutritional therapy does not work for breast cancer. You need scientifically proven treatment, and all this treatment that we give you have been proven by research, by clinical trials. Prof. Chuan has talked about clinical trials. Clinical trials are what make us decide whether or not the treatment works or not. So you have one group of women with the treatment, one group of women without the treatment, with normal treatment, then you see which group survives better. Okay, so does that answer your question? So the treatment, what type of treatment depends on the stage of diagnosis, grade of the cancer, the ER, the PR, the HER2, the size of the tumor, whether lymph nodes are involved or not. Okay, so each woman will present with a different cancer. So you must never compare yourself with other women. I have women who say, oh, but my friend had this done. How come I cannot have it? I say, because yours is a different tumor. Simple as that. Because breast cancer is not the same in 2 women.
Oh, that's very clear. Thank you so much.
Yes, that's what we mean by precision medicine and individualized treatment. We treat your cancer according to the type of cancer you have, the stage you arrive at, and also your expectations, and also your age. You know, I have 80-year-olds who say, I don't want too aggressive. It's perfectly fine. If I have an 80-year-old who's got a very bad heart and I'm thinking she's going to die of a heart attack within the next year, then we don't treat the breast cancer very aggressively, because she's more likely to die of a heart attack than of breast cancer. But if you have a young woman who's 30, then we have to be really aggressive to make sure she lives for the next 60 years or something.
Okay, thank you so much.
And another thing that is that breast cancer is the easiest cancer to treat because there's so many patients, there's so much research. If you have stomach cancer or liver cancer or pancreas cancer or esophageal cancers, your chance of survival is a lot lower. Breast cancer survival now is almost like 90% if you come early, you know. So the secret is actually early detection.
Thank you, Prof. I think that's a very important keyword for today. So with that, I would like to thank the panelists, Prof. Su, Dr. Jaya, Prof. Yip, and Dr. Chin for staying with us, answering all the questions. Happy to have all of you. Thank you so much. And with that, we have come to the end of our webinar today. So ladies and gentlemen, by 2050, we believe we will live in that world, right? But only if we all act now to keep up to the pace of discovery, we will. So it's time to make it happen, and it's time to support research into breast cancer now. And finally, we would like to thank our many corporate sponsors, donors, and volunteers who year after year continue to believe in our cause and continue to give us not only financial support, but the time, talent, enthusiasm to enable us to continue with our mission of educating and inspiring those affected by cancer. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending. We hope that this day fills you with knowledge, enriches your life, and most of all, leave you with hope. Good night. It's me, Retina, signing off. Take care and stay safe. Bye-bye.